Betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. The Bet with the Best podcast is sponsored by Amwager, an ADW built by horse players for horse players. Speed, power, and ease of use are at the core of Amwager, designed to give players the information and tools they need to quickly make anything from a simple win bet to a complex, structured superfecta or pick 5 wager. When you combine that with data and pool updates that are up to 60 times faster than the competition, Amwager is the clear winner in wagering on races online. Those are just a few of the many special features that Amwager has to offer, along with live video and race replays, free, integrated form-to-win past performance information, conditional wagering, and true odds, which are a prediction of off odds based on all available pool data. That and much more. Amwager is licensed and operated in the U.S., and best of all, they will actually pay you to play. If you sign up now and deposit and bet $150, you will earn a $150 lump sum bonus. So there is no reason not to give Amwager a try. If you want to bet with the best, then you need the best tools to wager with. You need Amwager. Welcome to episode 34 of the Bet with the Best podcast, sponsored by Amwager. This is going to be part 2 of our previous conversation with Keith Bush about computer betting models and applying those to racing at Hong Kong, and just more about racing in Hong Kong in general. So we're going to pick up where we left off. Keith, welcome again to the show, and now tell us about how you got to the point where you started to consider what you're going to do next now that you had your first successful model built, and you made a pretty big left turn or right turn or whichever way you headed to the Far East. So what kind of led you down that path, and what happened along the way?
Yeah. Okay. That's so the model was, again, it's, as I said on the end of the last episode, like, it's very stressful. It's almost like a competitive sports, right? Like, every day is like you're trying to, beat the game. It's a grind. It's very stressful. You're constantly looking at your numbers. Like, if you have a long stretch where the model's, not performing, is it just chance or is it out of calibration? So the whole period of doing this, I called it a science experiment. I'm not a pro bettor, but like, I was trying to be as focused as all the determination and focus that all the top people talk about on your podcast, right? What it takes mentally to do it at a professional level is amazing. And I felt some of that pressure, like keeping things perfect. I put so much work into this. Let's see if I can do it. To be successful for a year, that's like a huge achievement, as like a hobbyist, essentially. And it took a mental toll for sure. And then also this was towards the end of the summer of 2023. I don't know if people can, again, if you didn't have some major life event to kind of mark that period, that was a terrible time in horse racing. So that was like the cursed Saratoga meet. And a lot of bad things happened. And there was some frustration with how, stewards' rulings were taking place across the country. It was just like a very heightened period of time. And people don't remember, maybe they weren't going through the same thing I was going through at the time, but essentially I was very emotionally distressed at the time, so frustrated with everything that was going on. I'd put probably at that point several thousand hours.
You left out the worst part.
You left out the worst part, and then Kentucky Downs raises takeout after.
Well,
all
that's what I was going to say.
happens,
No,
right?
that was the breaking point. The breaking point for me was two things: was a series of failed to rule against Ired Ortiz at Saratoga, where he clearly violated the rules. It's impossible not to think that the rules were violated severely, and the fact that there was, no penalty placed. I said, I can't keep investing in a sport where they do this. Like, it's just not valid. And then almost exactly the same time, the point you mentioned is Kentucky Downs said they were going to raise takeout to pay for HISA. And, I understand they're a business and they can do whatever they want, but they need to think about the consequences of doing that. So in my situation there, I was at zero ROI. Okay. So when you're at zero ROI and I'm putting all this effort in to keep that number there, if the tracks nationwide raise takeout 1%, you immediately go to negative 1% and there's nothing you can do. Right. So like that's infinite takeout increase for a person like me. If you're at zero and somebody changes your takeout, it's an infinite change, right? Like the denominator there is zero. So like that, again, I didn't bet Kentucky Downs, but I was concerned that all the other tracks were going to use that example to raise their own takeout to pay for the HISA charges. And so, and again, it wasn't clear. As far as I understand, it hasn't happened. But at the time, I was like, this is very serious because any small takeout level increase where I was sitting would undo all of the work I had put in to achieve this number. And I just had it. Like that was like a tipping point for me where I was like, I cannot invest in this anymore. I need to find another path where the future's certain, where I'm not paying data fees. It was like all these things were building. I'm paying for data, and it just, everything came together. And I had heard about Hong Kong, some of the nice things about Hong Kong. And I just said, I'm switching. It was literally just like me sitting on the couch deciding during COVID that I was going to start doing horse racing. It was that same kind of visceral, I'm going to do Hong Kong because at least I don't have to pay for data. I knew the fields were big. I knew the pools were big. So it's like, okay, let's see what this is about. Now, granted, Hong Kong is very hard to learn about, and I didn't know anything. So I knew Pat Cummings knew a lot about Hong Kong. So I reached out to him on social media. And to his credit, I really can't thank Chris, you've mentored me quite a bit since we met at the Breeders' Cup. Pat did the same thing for me at Hong Kong. He took personal time, a couple hours of his personal time on like 2 separate phone calls to introduce me to the website to translate it, because it's a lot. It just comes at you like a lot of data, a lot of different terminology. They run things very differently. And he walked me through the website. And then he let me go off for like a month, and I figured out a lot of the pieces on my own. And I came up with an action item list, and then I met with him again, not on the phone and in person, and he explained all these other nuances to it. And then he gave me all these other resources, and he connected me with, there's, a small, intense group of Hong Kong bettors, kind of this misfit crew of people that stay up till 4 a.m. and play Hong Kong. So he kind of did that for me. And that once once you watch your first Hong Kong race, you got to be hooked. If you stay up and watch it, it's unbelievable. Just the grandeur of it, the scale of it. It's basically the Kentucky Derby every Wednesday and every Saturday, every Wednesday morning, every Saturday night. Maybe not Kentucky Derby, like Breeders' Cup Saturday. It's that scale of racing. It's amazing. And so I started watching the races, wasn't betting. I was just observing, watching the feed, learning how the tote works. And it's just completely different. And all of the signals you get from Hong Kong are just totally shaped differently than how they do it in the US. And spend the time learning. I got a data set and started playing around with that. And I started modeling a little bit, but just doing statistical analysis, like again, looking for signal noise ratios in various features and whatnot. But that's how it started. So it was just like on a dime, I'd had enough. I pivoted. I was still betting Equus, but I was already like planning my exit strategy for Equus, and and started making my entrance strategy for Hong Kong. Like, how was I going to attack Hong Kong? Because it's so different. I needed a different strategy because Equus wouldn't necessarily work there long term. And so that's that kind of, and in one question, it kind of pivots like the specific things I'm doing to at Hong Kong, but the strategy I'm taking and whatnot. But that was kind of the transition. It was violent. It was very much like my initial entry into horse racing, where I had no idea what was going on, and the terminology is all different. There are similarities. It is still horse racing, but it's a pretty different brand of horse racing, and just the procedures that are in place in that they use at Hong Kong to keep everything like a well-oiled machine, like a level of perfection that just, it's hard to imagine unless you follow it. So it's a very different game, and it's amazing, but it's also exhausting to learn, for sure.
So talk about some of the major differences or similarities between Hong Kong and U.S. racing, and then maybe spend a little bit of time about talking about the website and the information that's available that to you for free to anybody. That helps you follow the Hong Kong racing.
Sure. So fundamentally, the first thing about Hong Kong is that the Jockey Club basically owns everything. It's a completely self-contained system. And so there's top-down control of all of the aspects of racing. So like the owners of the horses are members of the Jockey Club, but they're not just members of the Jockey Club. You have to enter the Jockey Club, it's a very elite private club in Hong Kong, but then there's thousands of members of the Jockey Club. There's a smaller set of the members that actually, they basically enter a lottery to get import licenses for horses to actually compete. So these are serious owners that are very invested in the game in Hong Kong, but they are within the Jockey Club. So all of the horses are owned by members of the Jockey Club. The Jockey Club licenses trainers to be within the Jockey Club. So all of the trainers are basically approved by the Jockey Club, and they can be removed at any time. The Jockey Club can just terminate their contract at the end of the season, say, thank you, we're going to bring in somebody else. And they do exchange trainers. Again, I haven't been following it that long, but there's turnover every year. It's like, if you're not a good trainer, you're gone. They're going to bring in somebody new that has a lot of potential. The same is true for the jockeys. It's a small set of jockeys, maybe 20 jockeys, maybe 20 trainers, and that's it. You don't get jockeys except on big, like International Racing Day, international jockeys are allowed to enter, but day to day, it's this small set of jockeys that do all the riding, and they're elite jockeys. These jockeys come from all over the world. They were very successful wherever they were previously to even get an interview to become a licensed jockey in Hong Kong. So you have an elite set of trainers, you have an elite set of jockeys, you have a very small set of highly motivated owners, and you have a very small set of horses. So there's a fixed number of horses that are active in training in Hong Kong, because it's a very small city. It doesn't have a lot of space, so there's not a lot of room for pastures. So there's, I think, around 1,200 horses in training, and that's it for the entire year. They run like 980 races. It's like 10,000 starts. It's the 1,200 horses that are involved in that. So that's one thing. It's a like hermetically sealed system, and that gives them a lot of control. They own all their own data, and they use that to generate as much as possible, and they own the website with which that data is transmitted. So the Jockey Club is in control of data acquisition, data integrity, and data communication. And so they've made the decision to focus on bettors, meaning give everything, make it perfect, and give it away. That will increase handle. That is the business model they're employing, where it's completely a betting side. There's no, I guess, and I have to go into the owners. There's no breeding in Hong Kong. There's no space for it. So I don't want to say all, but 99% of the horses that are imported to race are geldings. So there's no potential for breeding at all. So it's a own to race ecosystem, and it is a race to attract bettors ecosystem. There's no other games in town. There's no other incentives in town. It's really completely betting driven. So that's the incentive structures. And then the racing itself is quite different. And this has been discussed now more in US racing. People are talking about it. It's pretty interesting. So they use a class system. So how the class system works is the Jockey Club employs a group, and I don't know the exact numbers, but there's a group of world-class handicappers. And these handicappers assess the horses and assign to each horse a number, and the number is the horse's ability. And that number is like their license to race. So they are only allowed to run in races where their rating number falls between two numbers, the lower bound and the upper bound of that race. And the races are divided into classes where, for instance, the class 5 race is the lowest level race in Hong Kong. Its rating parameters are 0 to 40. So any horse with a 0 to 40 rating in Hong Kong is permitted to enter that race. They're not allowed to enter any other race. They have to enter those races. And the levels are class 5 is 0 to 40, class 4 is 40 to 60, class 3 is 60 to 80, and then class 2, I've seen there's actually multiple rating scales. They use like 80 to 100 sometimes like 90 to like 110. Like they vary the class 2 rating to attract different levels of horses. And so horses can sometimes run in 3 and 2 and 1, kind of mixed at the top. And then class 1 is like, whatever I said, like 90 to like 1. I think the upper rating is 140. I think that's the maximum you can get. But at the top end, there's so few horses. So out of 1,200 horses, there might be only 30 that have a number that high that would be eligible to race at that super elite level. And so that's the class system. And they also do graded stakes sometimes, and they have international graded stakes where horses from other parts of the world race. But I would say 90 to 95% of the racing is this class system. And the class system is really cool because within a class, so that's just dividing horses by ability into chunks, right? So you'll get, let's use class 4. Class 4 is 40 to 60. So that's like your bread and butter Hong Kong race. The class 4, that's the most common race. That's like the mean ability is like 50. So 40 to 60 is like the first standard deviation of ability, let's say. So the majority of races are class 4. And so let's take that race and think about it. So the lowest rated horse is a 40 and the highest rated horse is a 60. So this is where that weight penalty comes in, where the lowest rated horse, the 40, receives essentially 0 extra weight. So it's the minimum jockey weight, which is 115 pounds. That's the 40 horse. A 60 horse will get the minimum weight plus 20, so 135 pounds. And then the other horses of different abilities in between get a varying amount of weight. And the reason they do this is, as we discussed before, this weight penalty is exactly calibrated to basically suppress the ability of the weaker horses and enhance the ability of suppress the ability of the stronger horses and enhance the ability of the weaker horses so that they're all about a 50 in the end, right? They're all running it to that exact same middle ground. And they're kind of to assist lengths and suppress lengths of ability. And so at like 40 to 60, so it's basically a pound per rating level. So you can think of a 41 gets a pound, a 42 gets 2 pounds, a 43 gets 3 pounds, up to the 60, they get 20 pounds because it's 60 minus 40 is 20. So that's the basic way that Hong Kong distributes horses throughout the levels and then penalizes them on race day to create as competitive a product as they can possibly create. So that's the racing structure. And then I guess the other thing to know about Hong Kong is that probably 90% of the races are on turf. They have 2 courses. They have 2 different courses. One track is a European style track called Happy Valley. And then the other track is called Sha Tin, and that is a American oval replica. It's actually, I was told, it's an outer turf and an inner dirt, but I was told, I don't remember who told me this, but it was constructed as a replica of Santa Anita's dirt track before synth was put in the first time. So they actually had whoever made that track come over and replicate the consistency of the dirt to have that as their inner. So they call it all weather on their PPs, but it's just dirt. And Châtain is this American style course. And Happy Valley is this crazy European course. It's like right in the middle of the city. It looks like Central Park. It's surrounded by skyscrapers. And it's wild. Horses run at both tracks, although some horses do specialize in one track or the other. And they run, so Happy Valley, the European courses run Wednesday mornings in the US. It's actually Wednesday night in Hong Kong. And then Châtain is run usually Saturday nights in the US, which is Sunday afternoon in Hong Kong. So like Sunday at noon is like 11 p.m. US. And they run September through early July. That's the kind of meet length. And they say 90% of the races are carded as turf. And another thing that's exceptional about Hong Kong is that they never go off the turf. So these tracks are designed because it's a tropical climate. The tracks are actually, they're hollow underneath. Like they have there's like the track, there's like 3 feet of track, and then underneath is hollow, and the rain just flows straight down into these catchment areas that they use as part of their like water management system in Hong Kong. So I've seen days where they're on the turf, and I mean, it's monsoon, pouring rain, no trouble. It's just unreal how, you know, the turf is immaculately maintained. And let's see. Oh, the other detail about racing I skipped before with the class system is, what do you do with first-time starters? So this is a really novel thing about Hong Kong racing, is that there's no maidens. First-time starters are inserted directly into the class system, and they're assigned a 54 rating, which means they're basically the middle weight. So they get like 10, 11 pounds in class 4. And so this is a wild thing to see when you watch Hong Kong the first time. You get a first-time starter in a race of older horses that could have 20, 30 starts, and there's 100,000 people in the stands just screaming. And so these horses, it's just wild to see these first-time starters. They have no idea where they're at. They look, you know, like deer in headlights. It's unreal. But that's how they do it. And so then the ratings are changed so that if a horse is strong, they'll perform really well or win. If you win, you receive additional rating points, typically 5 points if it's like a close win. If you blow the doors off and win by open lengths, you'll get more rating points, like 8, 10. I saw Cayenne Rising got 15. So, I mean, it's huge. 15 points is like weight plus a class. You know, it's a lot. It's a big jump. But if you win that impressively, you're going to get penalized because they realize that horse is just, that horse is it's an elite horse and shouldn't be a class 4. And if you lose, you drop to class 5. And then if a horse really is not very strong, you know, they maybe go a whole season without winning, they're in the teens, they're basically removed from the pool and retired. And they bring in, you know, first-term starters to replace the population.
So it's very, very different from U.S. racing. So
very
what about
yeah.
distances? What about distances?
Oh, sorry. So they're usually, they're turf sprints. So they use metric there. So everything's in meters. But they're approximately the same length types. They run 1,000 meter, 1,200, 1,400, which are equivalent to like 5, 6, 7 furlong races. And then they run 1,600 meters, so that's 8. They run 1,650, which should be a mile 16th equivalent. They focus mostly around 12 and 1,400 meter. They really like the one-turn turf sprints, but they do have longer races. They have, I think, 2,000 meter races, maybe even 2,200 meter races, but they're pretty rare. And the field sizes get smaller, so you don't get full 14 horse fields for those longer races. You'll get, you know, only 10 or whatever. But it's primarily turf, and then it's primarily one-turn turf sprint, except that, you know, Happy Valley, it's like, I mean, they have a 90-degree turn there. It's like a turn and a half. It's like a 90-degree turn and then an actual proper turn for their turf sprints. So, and then they do also run the 1,000 meter straight turf like they do in England. At Châtain, it has like a full 1,000 meter long straight.
So what about drugs? Legal and illegal?
Yeah. So
do they do testing?
Again, So yeah, it's no medications at all are allowed. I think it's, again, I don't know about like therapeutic medications. There's no LASIK, so that's the big one. LASIK is banned like pretty much everywhere else. Everything is, so the Jockey Club also employs all the vets. So there's no private vets at Hong Kong. So everything is managed by the Jockey Club. So drug testing is met. They do, I know they drug test because, they report it. The stewards report includes, they send horses for sampling post-race, so there's drug testing going on. I read the Hong Kong newspapers and I don't see a lot of controversy around drugs. So if it's going on, it's either not known or it's kind of accepted. I'm not sure, I don't live there. I don't know the inside scoop, but it seems like it's pretty clean racing. And the biggest thing would be there's no LASIK. So the horses do bleed pretty regularly. And amazingly, it's right in the PPs. Like they make it, they put the horses' vet reports are actually part of the PP. So you can see, they say horse bled, and they don't use the EIPH scale to report it, but they use a similar scale where it's like there was blood in nose, there was mucus in the throat, blood in throat, or like blood coming out of the nose. That's kind of like the EIPH scale for like how severe the bleeding was. And so they typically, if a horse bleeds, they like go on the vets list, and then they actually have to do what they call these So typically when a horse is injured or has some medical problem, they go on the vets list, and they don't get off the vets list until they run in these like practice races. They call them barrier trials, where they run like simulated races, and the horses have to perform. If a horse has a lugging in problem, or a horse bleeds or is lame, they want to see the horse, get cleared by vet and then run a race. And look comfortable for the horse's safety and for the safety of the horses, right? Like, so they have them run these practice races to kind of, not only for training, but to earn their way off the vets list, or their equivalent of it. They don't necessarily use that same terminology, but it's equivalent to what they're doing. So it's fascinating.
Do they show you those as part of the PPs, the training races?
Yes, all that. So everything is there. Like, if you ask, do they have, if they collect it, it's in the PPs, and they have replay videos of the PPs. They actually have at Hong Kong I know Benny Salisbury would love this. They actually have sorry, I'm failing to grasp the word, like where you to finish the run out, right? Like they actually have a special camera to be able to video
the gallop out.
The gallop out. Sorry, it wasn't coming to me. But they actually have a special camera set up so you can see the gallop out after the finish, just to make sure it's captured, because they know people want to see it, right? Like that's the level that they go to, and to appease the bettors' hunger for data. Everything's into the berry trial. Replays are there. All the timings there. The stewards' reports in detail are, and actually, so stewards at Hong Kong, amazingly, after the race is over, they actually bring the jockeys into like a steward's inquiry room, even if nothing went wrong, even if it was like a normal race, and there was no controversy. They grill the jockeys about why the jockey ran the race a certain way. And then they independently interview the trainer to see, like, do their stories match up? Like, was the jockey supposed to send, or they enforce, like, if the jockey did something the trainer said shouldn't, there's going to be a problem. Like, what's going on here? They're so worried about the integrity of the game to make sure that it doesn't hurt their handle. And they record, like they said, they do these interviews, and they actually record the interviews, essentially, like what the stewards were told in the PPs. If so you can see like these, it's like semi-transcripts of like an interrogation of the jockey after a race. Like particularly if like a horse is known to be like like they send, if they don't, what happened? And the jockey will say, well, the horse had a hitch in its step and it just didn't get there. And so I thought the best strategy was to go over to the rail and try to save ground. Like they tear them up, and it's all documented on the website. It's amazing.
So quite a bit different than U.S. racing. What about takeout? Yeah. What's the takeout on the races there? And also, is the betting, when you bet on it, is it commingled with everything else, or is there a separate international pool, or how does that work?
So my understanding, yes, again, these are some of these details. I'm not sure how so I do not think the U.S.
That's okay. If you don't know, you can say that.
Yeah. So sorry. So you said. The takeout. So the takeout. takeout is, I would say it's almost exactly equivalent to Kentucky takeout. It's 17 win, and exactas and doubles are like 17 and 17 and a half. And then they go up into the 20. So, but you think those core bets, that's basically Kentucky takeout. And then Hong Kong has no breakage. So so Hong Kong actually, all bets are minimum 10 Hong Kong dollars. And then payouts are in 50 cents. And then they round to the nearest 50 cents, up or down. But they don't just always go down. They actually round either way. So it ends up effectively being no breakage in the long run. So it's very similar to Kentucky at the lower ends of the takeout, that range, and the effective takeout with breakage and whatnot. And again, it varies a lot. Yeah. So the bets available are pretty primitive in the U.S., at least what I have access to in Arkansas. So it's like you basically have win. We'll show. Yeah, that's it. So there's no place betting in Hong Kong. They only have show betting. But there's two caveats of show betting. Show betting is actually, it's 1 through 3. Sorry, let me start over again. They call it place, but it's actually a show bet. But it's only a show bet if there's 9 or more horses. If there's 8 or fewer horses, it's actually an American style place bet. So you need to be aware of the field size when you bet it, because it might only be 1 or 2, not 1 through 3 when you place it. So that's one thing. Also, show bets or what they call place bets. They are independently pooled, so you actually know the odds at post time. It's not dependent on who wins. They actually partition the pool into like 3 parts, and then they can actually calculate based on the partitioning of the dollars how much a particular horse will pay in that placement, if that makes sense. So you can actually know the show price that we paid at post time. So there's that, and then pooling. So my understanding is, so Hong Kong, I believe, runs the world pool, and so I think like everywhere in the world commingles at Hong Kong except the U.S. They don't actually participate in world pool. But again, I would defer to somebody that runs an ADW to make sure that's true. But what I've seen is that the ADW prices that I observe match the Hong Kong prices on their website. So if there's commingling or not going on, the payouts agree, if that makes sense. So it's how the money gets partitioned, I'm not sure.
Okay. No, that's great information.
Yeah.
And the pool sizes are very large.
Enormous. It's on average, it's about 17 million US per race. So it's like, there might be 4 or 5 million in the win pool, something like that. It's for any given race. Like it could be a class 5 race. Class 5 race might have 3 million US. They list everything in Hong Kong dollars, but it's about 10 to 1. So you'll see like 30 million Hong Kong per win. And I looked recently at the averages. It ends up being about 17 million per race over the year. They run about 1,000 races a year. So it's about 17 billion in handle is what Hong Kong does. I think it's a little more than that, actually. It's like 20. So my number might be off a bit. But yeah, huge pools. Basically Breeders' Cup level, Breeders' Cup Saturday pools every day. So no limit to what you can bet, and you don't really. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so you have big fields, big pools. And what about clearly there's computer teams playing Hong Kong. I mean the Bentner team was, the famous teams started out in Hong Kong. How do they influence the odds? Are there the late odds changes that we see in the U.S.? Do you see those in Hong Kong? Are those managed any differently? I mean, talk about that a bit.
So CAUs are there. I mean, CAUs started in Hong Kong, and there's huge amounts of money bet by computers in Hong Kong. And it's, again, I'm not a fan of that, but it is what it is. And so you think about when you have these enormous pools, the teams have to bet enormous sums of money to really move things around. So if you observe massive odds changes in the win pool, which you do, the amount of money being spent on that horse to achieve that in, let's say, the last 30 seconds is impressive sums of money. So because there's so much money in the pool, the momentum it takes to move the odds a lot really flashes signals. It's impossible to drop the odds on last flash at Hong Kong, but it is not impossible to drop the odds in the last 30 seconds. And so how that's handled, it's kind of interesting. So Hong Kong openly embraces cause, and retail bettors there openly embrace cause as well. And so how it's managed is that they're very transparent that this is happening. And so the simulcast feed, the English language one anyway, I don't speak Cantonese, but the English language, Jockey Club sanctioned simulcast feed is a big part of their simulcast, is talking about late money, sharp money, odds velocities, okay, like how things are changing. They actually report on this. They have like sideline reporters talking about how the toad is moving around to be aware, right? If you end up going to the Jockey Club website, the Jockey Club runs its own tote that you can observe. And it's really well designed, kind of graphically designed in order to make odds velocities obvious to you. So if you have up like the exact grid, so they actually use like a matrix, and it's being colored in real time to denote how the money is flowing into the pool. And there's almost no lag. It's like very, very rapidly updated. And then you also see the same thing on the win tote. They actually color it. They call it green lamping. Green lamping is when the velocity is dropping by like 20. So the odd is dropping by 20% in a fixed amount of time. It goes green. They call it green lamp. And if it goes brown lamp, that's like a 50% drop. And so you can see these colors fluctuating on the tote as you're getting like in the last couple of minutes, last 90 seconds, you start to see the colors appear. And again, I'm not privy to exactly the agreements the cause have with the Jockey Club, but anecdotally, and again, this has been confirmed by some other people that play there, they've observed similar things, and they've even heard, they've actually talked to people that know, that there seems to be some kind of system set up where call money has to flow through certain pools before it flows through other pools in order to signal what's happening, to give people a little more trigger time to make decisions. So what I observe, and again, this is anecdotal, I don't have any evidence for it, but anecdotally, I observe that if you have the quinella toed up, the exacta toed up, and the win toed up, you will start to see the sharp late money converging in the quinella pool. It'll then migrate. You'll see the same patterns appear in the exacta pools, and those are very good signals that you're going to see a win drop late in the win pool. And I guess that's just because perhaps it's the sensitivity of those pools to late money. They just move the velocity faster because the pools are lighter, takes less money than betting in the win pool. Again, I don't know all the details of how it works in the background, but you do have, I would say you have 30 seconds to make a decision. If the horse that you like is the horse that the CAWs like, you have about 30 seconds to decide what to do. And the question is whether or not you want to follow the smart money because they're very good at what they do. So do you want to get a winner at a lower price? Or do you want to think it becomes its own game within a game almost? You kind of have to decide how to pull the trigger or not. And I haven't quite solved that problem. I have some statistics on it. It's unclear yet because it doesn't happen so frequently that I have like large sample statistics of what's the right play there. Because I don't know what the bottom price is going to be. Honestly, it's just that you have to pull or go, and you have to go with whatever price floor they've decided is fair. And with their massive rebates, that could be distasteful. So it's part of the game. It's kind of fun to watch, actually.
Do you have like the temporal data, historical data that you can use to model that and be able to predict how they're going to bet?
No, I don't have temporal data. I have some metadata. Like I have marked up data showing when it happened, right? I have some of that, but I don't have I just have an indicator that it happened, and so I can go back and look at gross statistics.
Okay, so anything else just in general about Hong Kong racing? Because now I want to talk about specifically, how you've tackled it, how you modeled it, how you bet it,
Okay.
what edges you find.
Yeah, it's it's so wonderful to watch. I mean, I guess just everything about it. It's just pleasurable to watch. You feel, how you get that big day feeling in the U.S. where there's this excitement. There's 100,000 people in the stadium, big fields. They actually wear real silks there. All the jockeys all the silks are actually made of silk. It's one of the requirements. You don't have, so it's everything. There's a grandeur to it. It probably is what the 70s were like. Before my time. Just everything, it's a pleasure to watch. I guess that's part of the visual aesthetic of Hong Kong racing. In addition to just the betting and the data and all that, it's I don't really like to watch racing on TV. I'd rather go to the track in person. Hong Kong is pleasurable to watch. The simulcast, it's in 4K. It's NFL quality lighting and motion stabilization cameras. So it's amazing. It's amazing to watch, I guess, would be how to summarize. It's enjoyable. The only downside is it's on at, midnight, and it actually shifts. It can shift to they start at 2 or 3 in the morning at my time. When it gets hot in the late spring, early summer, they shift to an evening, Saturday evening, which ends up being 3 or 4 in the morning here. It's brutal. Almost impossible. I mean, I fall asleep regularly. I just don't even make it. I don't hear my alarm. I don't get up, and I miss the day. But it happens. Late in the spring. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about your model for Hong Kong. How you built that. How you took what you learned with Equus.
Okay.
And applied it to Hong Kong, or changed what you were doing, and kind of how that's gone.
Okay. Yeah. This is I had an intuition that the Equus approach at Hong Kong would not work. And the reason is that the data is freely available, and so there's lots of guys like me that are maybe not professionals, but are, very technically sophisticated hobbyists, or very, in that intermediate range. And so I just thought, I don't live in Hong Kong. There's no way I'm going to be able to get unique data that would give me some kind of data edge. And machine learning is all about the quantity of data you have, the quality of the data you have, and the uniqueness of the data you have. So using a predictive model where I'm basically taking raw data elements, stuffing them into a sophisticated tool, and spitting out predictions, I thought there'd be essentially no edge there, because it's fairly easy to do at Hong Kong. It's hard at the US because data costs, and there's, the data has some issues. So if you have wrangling skills, you can have an edge in the US, but Hong Kong, the data is pristine right out of the Jockey Club. So I suspected that I would not be competitive unless I changed the way I was modeling. And so I decided to take a hybrid approach where I thought, and part of this is motivated by Sean Borman's success. I know he's an elite handicapper, and I mean, there's probably other things going on, but he suggested that speed and pace, if you're really, really good at it, can be successful there. And so the game theory I worked out in my head before I did this was, okay, so they have pristine data, and I have an expert telling me that if you're sharp and have good figures, it's possible. And so my thinking was, perhaps I could use machine learning to build even better figures. That's the goal. So I can get the data, and I need to generate using all the statistical tricks in my toolbox that maybe other people haven't been exposed to or don't know how to do, or have some creative way of thinking about the data. I can construct the speed figure and pace figure metrics in ways that are superior. Just a couple points edge. That's all you really need, right? So that was my goal. And so that's when I started. And again, we had long conversations about in the past where I really dug in and tried to learn old school speed figure making, pace figure making, understanding all the intricate steps. And then what I found is there's points, and then we talked about this earlier, where the assumptions being made by humans that are injecting assumptions or they're maybe not making human assumptions, but they're making very poor statistical assumptions. I have an edge because I know how to inject precise statistical assumptions into the figures at the key points to generate better figures. That was my theory. And I started working on that maybe in January of this year. Started building those figures and testing them, back testing them. And then I also, so that's one piece, is building. So speed figures are a representation of the past, like what the horse did, and it's part of their PP. But then there's also this other step is, can I then project forward what the horse is going to do? And so that's a prediction model step, where if you're very sophisticated about knowing what the horse might do in its current start, the start you're betting on, and incorporating things like weight, effectively, like we talked about, and doing some other steps, that's another level of edge that maybe a guy like Sean, who's more of a natural handicap from my understanding, he's a little bit of computer, but maybe a computer guy like me could be competitive with a guy like that if I had that orthogonal approach to building good figures. So that's where I started out. And I've been working on that for, I guess, it's September now, for like 9 months, pretty hardcore at night. I'm trying to build figures, back test them, integrating pace and speed together to see if I can understand how a race is going to, how the horses are going to kind of position themselves at key points in the race. And then I can make good assessments about what's going to happen from there. So I'm working on it. This is a work in progress. I mean, the numbers are good. They're very good. I know they're very good. And the question is, when I deploy them this season real time, what's going to happen? I don't know yet. But that's basically what I've been working on.
So you really focused on the speed figures, and then are you still building a model that predicts the odds of winning of a horse, or are you just doing old-fashioned handicapping but with your computer-generated speed figures?
I'm doing a bit of a hybrid. So some of this is IP. I don't want to say, but basically, I still use like an Equus style model to predict the morning line, because Hong Kong doesn't actually use a morning line. They don't issue a morning line. There are some websites, maybe social media accounts, that issue a morning line. I don't use that morning line. I use my own morning line. So I build a morning line because again, and we talked before, like, I don't read forums. I don't read the forums. So like, I don't know anything about horses. I don't know anything about the horses. Like, I literally just look at the data. Hong Kong is a bit different because I watch the races. So like, I know the horses now, but I'm not an astute, I don't have like this memory where I remember every horse's race and like how they did. So like, I need the aid of like, this is a good horse. I need a column where this is a good horse, this is not a good horse, based on, the projected off odds. But so that's a machine learning, that's a pure predictive model. And then I have a couple steps in the in the speed figure making process that are machine learning models, but they're just like these little simple machine learning models that get me to a step in the next step of the pipeline of creating the speed figures. But basically what I'm betting off of now is early pace, late pace. I'm doing a little bit of human stuff still, because I'm trying to understand what to do before I codify it and make it a pure algorithm. I'm not quite to a full press a button system. And then I'm using a machine learning model to take the past speed figures and project to the next speed figure what it's going to be. And then I primarily bet off that. I'm going to win bet this year, some exacta stuff too. And I'm using so I am using fair odds, but I'm using fair odds derived from the performances of the speed figures historically. So like back tested fair odds as opposed to like calculated fair odds. And I have a bunch of ways of like measuring like how good is this speed figure or like this set of speed figures. And if I've seen similar disposition of speed figures, what was the outcome? And I can compute fair odds from that. So it's like a very much a hybrid. I'm trying to live in both worlds this season because I think it's the right strategy. I might be wrong, but I have some preliminary evidence to suggest that it's the right way to do this.
So you tried to build the PPs into your speed figures, so it's all in one number, and then you've kind of model you take the speed figures and you built a model where if I have a field of 10 horses and they have the following figures, the probability of the fastest horse winning is this and second fastest is
Correct.
this. Is that kind of how you've done it?
Correct. Yeah. It's along those lines. So that's yeah. Like relative, like what's the relative speed? How close are they? And that can inform.
I mean, if
because there's like grouping, right? Like if there's 3 super fast horses and then they're slow, like that's a cluster, and you can use that to construct a bet. And so I didn't quite get as far as I wanted to before the season started, so I'm going to still be building as we go. But like I know my win speed figures are solid, and so I can start there and hopefully get some confidence when they run soon. But that's where I'm starting. Yeah. So I'm using the speed figures are now the central. So I'm using kind of an inference model where I have these speed figures that are based in first principles, and I'm trying to make them super precise estimates of reality. And then I'm using prediction models around that to kind of handle some of the accounting that you need to do for betting to make efficient bets. And I'm not quite there yet with those secondary processes.
But what you've described is really what the elite human handicappers do. So you're using machine to get there, but the guys that make their own figures and then they're like, that's exactly what you're doing is exactly what they do.
Okay. That's good to know. That's a good company.
Well, at least some, certainly like a Len Ragazin. Now there's another layer on top of that, but it's interesting that you are getting sort of that hybrid approach where before you were looking at all this data and trying to predict using that. Now you're like focusing on coming up with a way to create good figures that embed all that in there and then modeling those figures. And I'm assuming that for a given race, you also then try to, given the past figures, project what they're going to run based on the weight they're carrying. If you think, the trip you think they're going to get in terms of pace and speed. So you're kind of doing you're taking those and making a projection based on the environment they're going to run in today and the horses they're running against today, right? Yeah.
Oh, so that's another I should have said. So that you just raised a point that I should have answered 20 minutes ago. So one of the things about Hong Kong this is very relevant to what we're talking about is that Sha Tin, not so much. Sha Tin's kind of an American style course, so it's pretty fair if you look statistically. But Happy Valley, this European style course, is wildly biased. Like the starting gates, which they call barriers, the barriers, like they matter a lot. So like in certain types of races at Happy Valley, the outer post is impossible to win from, essentially. And the reason is because the location of the gate for like the 1,200 meter race, it's like the jockeys are actually looking at a wall because the course at like 150 meters in front of them is a wall because the course takes a 90-degree turn to the right. And so there's this situation where there's essentially no horse that's athletic enough in the world to make the rail from the 12 position at Happy Valley. It's almost impossible. So they have to take back and then they're just fighting their way through the entire field. And so draw is exceptionally important at Hong Kong, at least at Happy Valley for sure. And so that actually has to be factored in as well when you do this, like you were talking about, this projection of the disposition of the horses at like, the point of call that you care about. So that's something I'm working on. I haven't quite nailed it yet, but I've been playing with models that kind of construct that based on draw as well, because it's so important for half the races. Maybe not half, it's like a third, like the 1,400 meter, 1,200 meter, 1,000 meter, all have issues with draw. And Hong Kong reports it. You can actually see, they report the gate statistics on their website, and it's like a triangle. It's like the 12 post wins like 1% of the time. And the one position wins like 33% of the time. And it's just like a straight slope across the different barriers. So you got to factor that in. I mean, it's hugely important. But Sha Tin, not so much. It's a pretty fair course. Yeah.
So it sounds like you still have a lot
so there's that too.
to do.
Yeah.
I
I really feel like I'm very close on speed. The pace numbers are good. It's the integration process I'm still not convinced I've nailed. And I don't know because I haven't deployed it yet in like real scenarios. And it's so hard to know when you're back testing if you're introducing hope, like bias into your own tests, right? It's really hard to not just subconsciously cheat yourself, think you're doing better than you are. So the real test is always deploy live, and see what happens. So that should start very soon.
Yeah, we're talking right now, and it's hours away, right?
I'm watching the clock.
Literally.
Yeah, it's like an hour. It's an hour away.
That's when the first day of this race year, I guess, is kicking off tonight, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And then you'll be 2 days a week, pretty much nonstop then until it's over. Or
it's pretty much nonstop until July. Yeah.
And how many races a night?
That I would say you can expect 9, 10. It varies a bit, but you figure 10. It's about it's 50 weeks. Let's say maybe 48 weeks, 2 meets a week. It's like 96 days, and then about 10 because they run 960. That's about right. 10 races a card. 10 races a card. Happy Valley's 12 horse field. Shotton's 14 horse field.
I was going to ask that. How big can the fields get? Up to 14
that's pretty
horses?
Typical. The only time you get smaller fields is when it's the grade 1 types. There's just not enough of the elite horses to fill 14 typically. And then the marathon, they have some longer races, and you'll get less than 12, but they're still pretty big fields. They're 10, 9, 10. And I guess the others, I didn't mention, I missed a couple of points, like scratch it. So like the races as they're carded go off as carded. There's less than 1%. I ran the stats recently. Less than 1% of horses scratch at Hong Kong. It's not allowed. So the only way a horse leaves a race is typically if they get injured, like warming up, or in their stall or something like that, or they get sick. Like horses just don't scratch there. So one of the nice things about Hong Kong is if you handicap the card, it goes off as carded, and you don't have to make last minute adjustments. And it's on the turf. If they say it's on the turf, it's on the turf. They do not go off the turf ever. And less than 1% of the card will be scratched. So maybe one horse a night, but often less. I mean, there's been cards I don't see any. So it's pretty amazing. And then they do, the other thing they'll do is just one other detail. So this is an interesting facet, which it's like the one thing that's anti-betting they do there. And I think it's because they're so concerned about post-time maintenance, which they keep on their post-time schedule exactly. They don't deviate. And if they get behind for an injury or something like that, they actually reset the post-time and then make the post-time. But when they gate scratch a horse, like typically, I mean, that might be the most common scratch actually, is in the gate, the horse bucks or whatever, and they back out the horse to see it. And the vet's right there, and they're pretty conservative about it. They don't let them run unless they're perfect looking. So the vet will put up a flag. The vet actually holds like 2 flags, like a red flag or a green flag, so everybody can see. If they hold up the red flag, the horse is out. They just go. They don't pull the horses out and wait. They go. So they leave that gate open, and within 30 seconds they go. So there's no time for bettors to change their bet. It's like the one thing that's not better friendly, it seems like that they do. And I don't know that but it's something I've observed that I thought was, wow, that's really different. That seems they just send them. Yeah.
So it sounds like right now you feel like your edge is in your figures, and and are you primarily betting to win, or what other pools besides the win pool are you tackling, or is that just where you're focused now until you expand on your model?
So so right now my own betting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the win betting where the stats tell me I have an edge, and I'm going to scale Kelly style, where if the fair's telling me, if I'm betting live, sometimes I guess the other thing I should say is one of the reasons I like the speed figure approach is that I can actually test the success without looking at the tote. I can run this tote on or tote off. And some of the bets I have tote off, meaning I can just go to sleep and put the bet in, can be profitable long term. So I have a motivation to work on that because when they go to the twilight hours, it's almost impossible to stay up at my age, you know. So I want to put some bet ins that I think have a chance. But when I'm running it, you know, when I'm running tote on, meaning I'm observing the tote and I'm using the imputed odds from the previous race to kind of estimate along with my morning line and what I'm seeing coming up. I'll scale the bet like a Kelly style scaling to place the win. So I am doing it that way. So primarily win. Again, I don't think I'm good enough yet to move really beyond win. Like we've talked about this at length. That you're kind of the the high priest of the win bet, which I agree. You really should master the win bet first. So I'm still working on that. I do think I can start introducing some at least exacta type wagers. I think the speed figures allow me to fade, especially when I see the favorite is really poorly rated, and I think the public has a chance of missing it. I think I can start doing some intra-race betting, like vertical betting, to take advantage of that without needing to work all the stats. Like I really kind of want to. Another part of this is like I just felt so stressed out, being so, you know, like handcuffed by the analytics that I was doing in 2023. I want to do a little more of the human side because one, it's more fun. It's more of a learning experience, but I still want to constrain it within guardrails that have a chance to win, right? Like that's the goal is twofold. It's the winning is fun for sure, but like enjoying the process of winning should also be fun. And maybe that would keep me from being successful. You know, I don't know, but I feel like to stay in the game, I really need to have a little more fun during the betting process. And I'd be curious if anybody wants to kind of reach out to me and tell me I'm wrong on that. I would love to hear the flip side of that. But I really feel like you can't be such a handcuffed by the analytics doing this.
To me, if it's not fun, there's a lot of better ways to make money, especially if you're smart. So you
there is, and that's the other thing. You know, analytics work in the. You know, you can stock market. You put money in the stock market, you're going to make money, like even if you do nothing, right? So it's pretty hard to lose tons of money if you're. So horse racing is a very hard way to make money, and it's super interesting though. So I feel like I needed to take a step back and enjoy it more. And that's part of the process.
What about double?
Especially.
Oh, go ahead.
So my understanding, so the double takeout is slightly higher, and so I'd rather I think the double takeout is like it's just slightly higher than the exacta and the win. So like, why do it when I can? I'm very takeout conscious just because I don't use a rebate, and for me, it's like 1% matters a lot when the edges are so small. So I just want to focus and see what I can do in places where I really have an edge, at least where I think I see I have an edge in the stats.
So
and honestly, if I look through, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say from my, anecdotally looking through like back testing, it seems like the speed figures give more intra-race opportunities, like this grouping of fast versus slow versus clearing away two fast horses sequentially.
Right.
Kind of. Yeah, like one of the reasons I've kind of gravitated to exacta is I see there seems to be like gaps, and there seems to be more opportunities to just kind of two up top and weight them accordingly to their relative speeds. And I don't know which one's going to win, but I'll weight the bets like one's faster than the other, and they're going to leave the other horses behind. So I've seen that, and I'm going to try to exploit that first.
Yeah, and when you can fade a weak favorite, you can really exploit that in the vertical pools in a way you can't do in the horizontals. Yeah. I mean, but to me, it's more like it's your handicapping wagering tool book. You don't want to play doubles to play doubles, but if you have two races that are sequential that you think offer value, you can kind of multiply that with a double. But that's the only time, I recommend doing it. But I mean, you don't want to like just play it because you want to play the doubles, just like you don't want to play an exacta just to play an exacta.
Right.
You want to do it where it makes sense. You have, not only do you have an opinion on the, it just depends on your opinion or what your model is telling you where the value is, right? And you want to exploit that in maximal way.
Yeah, and I think it just unfolds that way. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, starting with the win to me is always the best way to go. And it sounds like that's going to be your focus for this year, I guess. And then you're going to
the win bet,
continue to try to.
So the win bet, I'm focusing on the win bet because I've done all the analytics to know where I actually have real edge in the win bet. I have those numbers. I've run the test multiple times. I know where I have the bets. I know how to scale them correctly. The vertical stuff is going to be more intuition. Like I can see in the speed figures that I have a gap, but I actually haven't had a chance to like do all of the analytics to know how should I bet that exacta, right? Like if they're half a point apart, but they're 2 points from the group, like how should I weight? I don't know the weighting, but I'll bet it to weight it appropriately. But I don't have those tables built where I can just like, okay, this is a situation, this is what I do. And so I'll be a little more nuanced, like human about that, as opposed the win bet though I have locked. So I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to execute the plan, and the plan should be successful. We'll see if it survives the first shot.
Well, yeah, I mean that's all you can do, right? You're going to test it, and you're going to test it with some real money, and you're going to monitor things and make adjustments as they go. But you feel pretty confident that you've got a pretty good foundation to build on. It sounds like.
Correct. Yeah, I think I put in the time. I think the numbers look good. And hopefully it works. So I've only been through one full season of Hong Kong. And so now I'm wondering, do things change season to season big? I haven't seen anything in the data, but then my historical data only goes back, like a few years. I think 4 full years. So like, things could happen. There's a new trainer, a new young guy that's a hotshot from like Australia. So who knows? Things could change drastically because it's such a small pool of people, right? There's 20 trainers. One new trainer is 5% of the pool. And so it could matter a lot. I did believe there's one new jockey as well this year. They rotated out somebody. I didn't check who left, but there's a female jockey, the first one, I think in a long time. So we'll see. Like we have no stats on them. And one person can interact, can change the whole complexion of a race, depending on how they behave. We'll see. I hope everything, I just want everything to stay, as we say, mathematically stationary, right? I want this year to look exactly like the last few years, and I'll do well.
Well, that brings up one thing, though. Are you just assuming the jockey and trainer performance are kind of embedded in your speed figures, or are you trying to model that explicitly, either in the projecting the figure for a race, or I'm just curious on that.
It'll matter. It'll definitely matter for the off odds estimates. What is interesting, so this is another thing, and again, to not go into too much detail, but one of the interesting games in Hong Kong is really between the trainers and the jockey club's handicappers, right? They're at war with each other essentially over the rating number, because it kind of determines their chances of winning, right? So this is a very important point. And actually, Tommy Massis did a Spaces maybe last year or 2 years ago, and he mentioned this as something very important to track. Is the optimal situation for a horse in Hong Kong is to lose so that they can drop down to the bottom of the class. And then because you essentially get approximately 5 points per win, although if you win impressively, you get more, but you never get less than 5 points rating increase for a win. So what you want to do is kind of drop down to the bottom of the class, so you're low weight, and then you want to win 5 points. You're still in that class, but only 5 pounds. Win again. So you can win 5 times within a class before you move up into class. And so there's a strategy that he suggested. There's a strategy, and I've been observing it, where the you're trying to get your horse to lose. Now, again, you're not allowed at Hong Kong. They're very serious about being very competitive. So they won't necessarily accuse a trainer of not winning a race, but what they won't do, they will refuse to lower their rating, even if they lose. And so there's the Jockey Club thing. I don't think that was a maximal effort of the horse. I'm going to keep the rating the same. So you got no benefit from losing that race. And so there's this kind of war going on where the trainers are trying to basically lower their horse's rating as fast as possible to get a win in, to get some space to win with low weight, right? And the Jockey Club is trying to prevent that because they want the horses to run very competitively. And again, I don't know if this, but this just seems to be an incentive for this to happen. And it seems to be the case that you see clusters of wins at Hong Kong quite a bit, where a horse will win, they won't win for a year, and then they'll win 3 or 4 races in a row. And a horse that had no form just all of a sudden pops a sequence of wins. And it's statistically significant difference, right? Like that cluster is too clustered to be chance. So it could be the horse is in form, or it could be more strategizing by the trainer to position them optimally. You can look and see, like, where does that sequence of wins start? And it seems to be the case that you want to bet a winner. Like that's like a very good strategy until the horse reaches a resistance just from the weight and class level where they can't achieve any higher. Like they just pop and they go on a run, and then they've reached the maximum penalty that they can withstand and still compete. And then they'll float sideways for a long period of time. That is something that's definitely going on. Like those games are going on between the trainer and the club handicappers.
Interesting. So that's a little bit of trainer intent there, but they have to be
trainer
really
intent,
careful
yes.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and again, it seems to be. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, keep going.
No, I was just like, I've heard some pro guys also mention along those lines. They've observed similar patterns, so there seems to be something there. And that's another, I guess, rabbit hole to really lock down those stats. But I've observed similar things that seem to be the case. So it's interesting.
So anything else about the model or betting on Hong Kong races that we haven't touched on?
One thing we didn't touch on was just the availability of bets in the U.S. It varies wildly from what I understand. And it's pretty limited menu. So like tonight I have access to 2 pick threes. There's like an early pick 3 and a late pick 3. And then win bets, exactas, doubles, and quinellas. But we don't have access in the U.S. I believe most people in the U.S. do not have access to the really exotic bets that make the headlines, like the pick 6 that pays millions, and the trio bet, the double and triple trio bets that are wildly impossible to hit, right? That pay millions. So I think in Canada you can bet some of those bets. I do not believe in the U.S. you can bet them. At least I can't. And I've heard others around the country say they cannot as well. So it is it's more of an old-fashioned limited betting menu.
Which for most players is probably a good thing. But,
and with 14 horse fields, imagine
right.
Horizontal.
I was going to say that the big
exotic
fields
bets are so expensive there. Yeah, big fields.
Yeah, and with big fields, you get potentially good payouts even in the win pool and exacta pools. I mean, with a 14-horse field, you can hit a pretty nice exacta, especially if you got it. Certainly, if you identify a horse that's not one of the favorites, you can get some juicy payouts just in the vertical place, even just exactas. What advice would you give somebody? They listen to this and they say, wow, you know what? This kind of sounds interesting. I want to learn more about Hong Kong. I want to start getting involved. What advice would you give them to get started? If they're a modeler, but even if they aren't, if they're just a player, that's what's the first step, and how would you recommend that they get going?
Yeah, so I would go to the website. So I think the entry point is just go to the website and observe it for a card even. First step should be go to the website. So it's racing.hkjc.com. And then maybe we could put some links up. So racing.hkjc.com. And then that's the Jockey Club's racing website. And then you have to go with a couple of drop-down menus in there. It's like racing info local, and then select a race card. And that is the live, like that's the PPs. That's your entry point into Hong Kong racing. That'll be the full card that's coming up. And then if you click, everything's like web-based. So like if you click on a horse, you get their lifetime PP pops up. Like every race they've ever run, odds, fractions, beaten lengths, all that stuff is in there. And you just see how much data they have. You can click on the replays, it's right there. You can click on their workouts, it's right there. Their vet reports are right there. It's an avalanche. So there's that. I would watch a full card just to see it. It's amazing. And then if you're still, because it's pretty overwhelming too. And then I'm gonna, like I said, I want to put a link up. So there's a primer that DRF put on like 7 years ago that Pat Cummings pointed me to, and it's a really good. It's like an hour, 10 hour, 15, and they walk you through Hong Kong and like the website, and it hasn't changed much either. The website's pretty stationary, so like it looks like it looked years ago, and so you can see everything, like the track, like they have so much, like everything's on there, like where to find statistics that they keep. They do all the jockey and trainer statistics for you, the bear statistics, the course layouts, and then like the race card for the year, like when the certain turf race, because they do some dirt racing, and like when that's going to be, they tell you ahead of time. There's like weeks where they only do dirt racing because they can repair. They do that like a turf repair and rejuvenate a couple times a year. You can see all that stuff. Just like the website and this YouTube video is quite informative. It'll like get you to a conceptual framework of the website that would allow you to explore on your own. That's really important. Is like just getting some purchase on the problem, and then it just takes time to learn the website where everything is. That's probably the fastest way to get a first snap, but it's very different, and I think it'll take a while to adjust to just the format of the data is a little bit different than how we present in the US. And getting your head around the class system and the weights is really, it's so important and so hard to do.
So anything else on that we haven't covered about betting with a computer model or Hong Kong racing or anything else?
Not really. I mean, it's something to watch. Maybe the one other thing would be to talk about the stewards there, just I guess, so if people want to watch Hong Kong, what I would recommend they do is watch a card of races and particularly pay attention to how the jockeys behave on the course. So that was one of the things that struck me the most and again, I wasn't a person that watched races. I mean, I was a pure modeler. I wouldn't even read the form, but I was watching Hong Kong to understand the game. And you'll see the behavior of the jockeys is just so different than in the US because the penalties, like if the jockeys do anything even remotely unsafe or against the rules, they receive unbelievable penalties, months and months of like they measure it in months, but it's like, a month is 8 race days of penalty and fines, and just, so the jockeys there behave on the track to make sure that the stewards do not single them out for anything. So you'll see the heads turn, but before they move a horse to a different path, they turn their head to look so that on the camera, the stewards can see that the head was turned to make sure it was clear. They look. They don't use their eyes. They actually turn their head to make it clear on video that they looked. You'll see there is no herding in Hong Kong at all. The stretch runs are poker straight. They actually, the fields fan out as they come onto the stretch, and the field fans out and they run in a straight line. It's just nothing like what you see here. The horses run perfectly straight arrow stretch runs. Just that kind of stuff is just wild. There's almost no inquiries at Hong Kong. It's very rare to see an inquiry because that means that some jockey is going to lose his paycheck for months. They're very serious about it. And it's good to see because the races never have any problems. There's never any controversies. But I'm going to say never, but it's so infrequent. I can't remember the last time they took down a horse at Hong Kong in a whole year of watching. It was just unbelievable. So it's really refreshing to just see the races run the way they're supposed to be run. And the horses win because they're fast, not because of some other shenanigans that's going on. So that's very refreshing to see. And it's like a positive thing I feel about betting there.
No, well, it sounds like definitely those are the kind of things that can make it more fun too. So let me ask a sort of another question related. What are the, one or two things that they do differently in Hong Kong that if they brought those and did it like that in the U.S. would make the U.S. game and product, much better? You don't have to limit to one, but don't give me every single one. But what are the top few? It doesn't have to be just one, but what are?
So what is? So how would I order this? So I think the stewardship is big for me, because I want to solve the math problem, and the inquiry problem is frustrating, right? So I want the jockeys to behave like they should be optimal drivers. I want them to behave optimally and not do anything that violates the rules because it's hard to model that. Right? So I like the fact that the stewards create an environment where the jockeys are highly incentivized to run well, to run correct races and kind of consistently know that I'm going to get the best ride out of the horse, right? Plus, the jockeys are all world class. These aren't lower end jockeys. These are world class jockeys, and they're highly incentivized to run the races correctly without any incidents. So it is really important to me that because it makes the modeling problem more clear. And then, there's things that you can't solve, their facilities are so good, but that's because they make so much money they can afford it. So it's not really fair, but I guess the class system is also really nice because it makes everything transparent about the organization of the races. It also makes the fields bigger. And I know the U.S., recently there's been talk about that. I think that's a huge positive change. If it's done correctly, that the class weight system, it makes it, so again, I understand it's unfair for owners because they're making it harder for owners to win races. The best horses are penalized, but it makes it a much better betting product and a better math puzzle for the bettors. And because the jockey clubs focus on handle, those two pieces really combine to form a really great product where with free data and those two pieces, bettors can kind of run rampant and not worry about all the ancillary problems. But it comes at the expense of the owners at Hong Kong are really doing it because they want to be involved in horse racing. It's not profitable. There's no breeding. They're not going to make money off these horses long term. So it's really just to be part of it. And they're all high net worth individuals that can afford it. It's like a subsidized gambling game. It's great. And the system is structured so that bettors have fun and everything's kind of tailored for them. And it's just a great ecosystem. Can it be replicated in the US? Those pieces, I think definitely the class system could be. I definitely think the steward thing could be, but it's much harder because we use a distributed stewardship system. There's not a centralized system. So that would be hard to enforce the way they do it at Hong Kong for sure. But it would be worth trying.
So I'll wrap it up with a couple more similar kind of questions.
Yeah.
If you're somebody like yourself that wants to begin modeling, horse races, either in the U.S. or Hong Kong, what would be, the best advice you could give them?
Yeah. Okay. It depends on your skill set, I guess. But if there's somebody like me, you're saying somebody like me that has a kind of technical background, knows how to model, basically. There's a couple things. So the data is available. So the data can be you can get the data. Let's say you can get large quantities of data for free. Actually, there's big data sets of Hong Kong data online. You can just download it. People have curated it for like machine learning competitions. So that would be a place to start, is go to like Kaggle, search Hong Kong data, download the data set. That I've looked at it. It's the correct data set. It's a bit older, but it'd give you a signal noise test. So you'd have data. To get a model is interesting. So I am going to release the Equus model. So I don't really use it anymore. I'm actually planning to open source Equus soon. A later version of it, not the super elite version of it, but a very good version of Equus that, if you had technical skills, would be easy to link with some Hong Kong data to just get started messing around. So I guess the advice would be, this is kind of shameless, but I would say follow me, because I'm going to tweet that out. Follow me like on Twitter or something. So like, I'm going to tweet out that release eventually at some point. It's not going to be forever. I'm just trying to get it to a point where it'll be releasable. So that would be, you'd get a free model basically. And if you had some ability to kind of, instead of tying in US feed, you could tie in a Hong Kong feed, you'd be, going. And then get into the Jockey Club website and understand the components of the racing. If you're already a US player, really investigate the class system and the weight system. If you're not a horse player, then go read all the US handicapping books and then download my model and try that maybe. Because it's still racing. You still have to understand the fundamentals of racing. So you'll need those pieces to understand what the machine learning algorithm would be spitting out, like what it's consuming and what it's spitting out. And I feel like it's important for the community to have a model. I don't know of anybody that's released an open source model that can do all that. And I've wanted to do it for a while. It's just a matter of cleaning it up and getting it out there so that people can start building off it. Because I'm sure there's better ways to do modeling. It's just the model that I came up with that was fairly successful. And so it'll give people a picture of, okay, this is how a horse racing model works, but this guy's crazy. This is the wrong way to do it. Let me put this other feature in, and let me do these adjustments, and this rescaling is wrong. And you can, but people need a starting point, and so I want to provide that. It's coming soon. I can't give you a date, but it's coming soon. So that would be my advice. The easiest path is just wait for me to get my release my model. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So you invited people to follow you on Twitter. What is your Twitter handle? So the listeners could do that if they're interested.
So it's at Thorval, Thorval, if I spelled that correctly. Thorval, yeah. And it's coming. It will be before Christmas. I will say that. It will be out for sure.
So is Thorval thoroughbred evaluation? Is that what it's supposed to be, or is it something?
Yeah,
else?
that's what I came up. When I was first coming up with the Twitter handle. Yeah.
No, I figured it out. That's not bad. I like it.
Derby 1592 took me forever, and then somebody. I didn't want to ask you. I was trying to figure it out on my own, and then somebody finally gave it up on Twitter. So problem solved. I puzzled over it forever, and yeah, it made sense.
All you had to do was ask. Yeah, that's like
I wanted to figure it out.
That's like yeah, it's the little skit of trying to guess someone's name, and all you have to do is ask them their name, and they'll tell it to you. But then you spend an hour trying to guess it.
Yeah, and
all right. Anything else? I think.
Yeah, we're running close now. So yeah, no, I think that's it. So that would be a good way. It'd be a good way.
All right. So you're about ready to make your first bet of the year on Hong Kong racing later not tonight or this morning, wherever you're at.
Yeah.
So what's your first bet of the year? By the time this gets out, it'll have been run. But I'm just curious. Give me your first bet you're going to make.
So
or you haven't?
Well, actually, I haven't even looked at the tote, and it's soon. Did I just? No, you're there.
No, I'm
let me just look, because this is a tote dependent bet. I got to get in here.
Okay, this will be the non-evergreen
I'm definitely
broadcast.
so,
Actually, it won't matter because by the time they listen to it, the race will have been run.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I just thought you might have had a.
Yeah. So no, I'm going to bet Kingly Demeanor in the first. It looks like value. He's 14-1 on the morning, or 14-1 on the tote, and I have him as a very good chance. So that would be.
I'm going to make my
be
first bet ever. I'm going to make my first bet ever on Hong Kong racing. Yeah. I'm going to play Kingly Demeanor. So you better win.
On the nose. Well, I mean, he's 14-1, but the Go is the favorite. Zach Purton's riding. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I have the favorite as a good length off, and I think it's worth 14-1. So we'll see.
Yeah, and so that's the cool part about having these big fields. You're the first race of the year, and you've got a double-digit odds horse that you're looking to play. I mean, that just shows you that there's potential for some scores even in the win pool, exacta pools, and stuff when you get the big fields. Good example.
Yeah, it's exciting.
All right, well, we're gonna wrap it up.
I was expecting him to be lower. Yeah.
That means that the smart money is somewhere else. We'll have to see. You trust your model.
I do.
Trust your numbers.
You got to trust your numbers. You shouldn't be doing it.
Exactly, and it's no fun, right? If you're just betting. So if you're afraid to play your own, bet on your own work and opinion. All right, well let's wrap this up. Yeah. This was great. I didn't mean to keep you quite this long, but it was good discussion. I really appreciate. This has been incredibly open discussion, and your willingness to do things like share your model, open source. I mean, for the younger guys that want to get started, that just sounds like an incredible opportunity. So I'd encourage any of you out there that with the modeling mindset, interested in trying to get going and racing, or if you've been struggling a little trying to do it on your own, that'll be a great opportunity. So that's really cool. And I'm sure some of the players will appreciate that. And that's what this podcast is all about, trying to help the people that are trying to help themselves get better. So, Keith, really appreciate it. Really an interesting conversation. And also appreciate all the listeners out there. And may you all boldly go where no horse player has gone before.